Errol stood at the center of the council hall, his dark, marble-like skin drinking in the harsh light, the golden scales on his shoulders shimmering with every subtle movement. His reptilian eyes scanned the chamber, locking onto anyone who dared meet his gaze. With a sharp motion of his clawed hand, the looping holograms above flickered, human ships tearing through asteroid fields, colossal drills burrowing into rock, colonies spreading across barren moons. Pulsating red overlays marked each violation of neutral zones. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegations. In their insatiable pursuit of expansion, Errol's voice dripped with contempt. Humanity defile the sanctity of galactic law. Their arrogance is a disease spreading rot through the balance we have fought to maintain. I call for immediate military action to rectify this threat. Unease swept the chamber, yet no one openly opposed him. The holographic delegations flickered, their unreadable expressions shifting between curiosity and concern. The physically present members remained silent, except one. Ridiculous, came a steady, defiant voice. Samuel Poirier, Chancellor of Earth, rose from his seat, his silver hair immaculate, his dark suit a stark contrast against the glowing projections. He exuded unwavering confidence as he met Errol's gaze. This is a fabrication. Your so-called evidence is riddled with inconsistencies. The timestamps contradict traffic records, and those so-called neutral zones have been abandoned for decades. Errol's golden scales shifted slightly. Mind your accusations, human. You tread dangerously close to insulting this council and its principles. Poirier took a step forward, his hands clasped behind his back. I insult no one. I expose the truth. Murmurs returned, some shifting in apparent approval. Errol's lips curled into a faint snarl. Humanity has always spoken of truth while its actions devour the galaxy. The Council will not stand idly by. With a flick of his clawed fingers, Errol cut Poirier's microphone, silencing him mid-sentence. Shock rippled through the chamber. Some delegations turned toward Errol in muted alarm, others remained statuesque. The session will continue without interruption, Errol declared, his voice a blade through the tension. Poirier adjusted his suit and turned toward the exit, each step carrying silent defiance. As he neared the edge of the chamber, a translucent figure emerged from the shadows, a being of pulsing light, its voice a melodic whisper. "Congratulations," Sathar murmured. "You just declared war on the wrong species." Poirier's shuttle departed the council hall, his expression grim as he strode through Unity's docking bay. Officers saluted, but he ignored them, his focus on the sleek PDA in his grip. Urgent notifications cascaded across the screen. He opened the first report. The footage was chaos, civilians running through metal corridors, smoke billowing, screams piercing the static. A massive Thorn Dreadnought loomed in the distance, plasma cannons lighting the sky. Explosions ripped through the settlement before the feed cut to black. The next video was no better. A mining colony engulfed in flames, Thorn infantry methodically gunning down anyone who resisted. A child's cry rang out before the screen went dark. Theta 7. Delta 4. Caliban Reach. All under attack. Poirier clenched the PDA, his knuckles white. Humanity was already at war, whether the Council admitted it or not. He stormed onto Unity's command deck as a terminal chimed. The incoming transmission was marked urgent. Admiral Ian Hossman's holographic form materialized before him, his broad frame exuding authority. "Chancellor, we're receiving scattered reports of attacks across the colonies." What the hell happened at the Council? The Thorn presented fabricated evidence of our so-called violations. Before I could refute it, they cut my transmission. "A coordinated humiliation," Poirier said, voice edged with fury. He gestured to the console. "And now this." Hossman's expression darkened. "This wasn't just about silencing you. They're playing the long game, setting the stage for something bigger." "Exactly," Poirier said. "This isn't diplomacy, Admiral. It's war. You have full authorization to respond accordingly. Strike back. Show them what humanity is capable of. Hossmann's tone was steel. Understood. I'll convene the fleet commanders immediately. We'll secure evacuation routes and protect what colonies we can. Poirier's gaze hardened. We cannot afford to look weak. Hossmann gave a sharp nod. We won't. The transmission ended, leaving Poirier alone in the chamber's cold, humming silence, a silence that carried the weight of humanity's next move. Admiral Ian Hossmann stood on the command deck, his expression a mask of focused determination. Around him, the bridge buzzed with controlled urgency as crew members worked feverishly. Holographic maps projected before him displayed colonies under attack, each marked by a pulsating red beacon growing brighter with every second. Lieutenant Rivera, Hossmann commanded, his voice sharp and precise. Compile every fleet within range. I want their captains on secure comms in 5 minutes. Inform them of the situation and transmit the attack reports. Rivera nodded briskly, her fingers moving swiftly over the console. Yes, sir. Data is transmitting now. Hossmann's gaze locked onto the shifting holograms. Each glowing red marker felt like a blow to his core, but he pushed aside the weight of it. Send the order. Mobilize all available fleets to reinforce the colonies under attack. No hesitation. Move now. Orders rippled through the chain of command. Across the display, blue markers representing human fleets shifted, converging on the embattled colonies. Above Theta 7, the sky burned crimson. Streaks of plasma lit the atmosphere, cutting through the smoke and ash choking the settlement below. The colony's defenses struggled to hold the line, automated turrets firing in rapid bursts at the towering Tharn Dreadnought looming in orbit. Civilians rushed toward evacuation shuttles, engines roaring over the sound of collapsing buildings and artillery fire. The sudden arrival of human reinforcements broke through the cacophony. A dozen sleek warships emerged from hyperspace, hulls shimmering as weapons powered up. The lead ship, Spear, dove into the fray, railguns tearing through Tharn vessels patrolling the atmosphere. The colony's battered defenders cheered as coordinated strikes shredded enemy formations. On board Spear, Captain Darnell shouted, "Concentrate fire on their orbital support. We need to break their line and give the colony breathing room." The ship's cannons roared, sending volley after volley into the Tharn Dreadnought. Explosions rippled across its hull as shields failed. Human fighters weaved through the chaos, engaging enemy craft and drawing fire from the evacuation zones below. Not far from Theta 7, the isolated colony of Caliban's Reach faced devastation. A Tharn assault force had breached the perimeter, their infantry moving methodically through the settlement. Desperate messages crackled through emergency comms. "Governor Adabo, this is Lieutenant Commander Franson," a firm voice cut through the chaos. "We're inbound with transports. Hold your position as best you can. We'll extract your people." Franson's strike force approached, using the rocky terrain to mask their movements. Their lead ship slipped past enemy sensors, allowing shuttles to land amidst the chaos. Heavily armed Marines disembarked, setting up defensive perimeters. "Get the civilians on board now," Franson barked. Civilians, faces streaked with soot and fear, clambered aboard the shuttles as Marines held the line. Tharn infantry pressed forward, their massive forms relentless. A Marine, pinned by enemy fire, shouted into his comm, "We're out of time, Commander. We need air support." Franson's eyes flicked to his tactical display. "It's coming. Hold the line." A human gunship roared overhead, missiles obliterating the advancing Tharn. The last shuttle lifted off as the perimeter collapsed, Marines retreating under heavy fire. Back on the command deck, Hossmann stood with arms crossed, watching live feeds from the colonies. Data streams scrolled across displays, casualty reports, evacuation numbers, enemy positions. Each loss weighed heavily, but successful extractions and coordinated strikes provided a measure of solace. Rivera approached, her expression grim. "Admiral, we're receiving new reports. Multiple stations and outposts are under attack." "Tharn?" Hussman asked sharply. She hesitated. "No, sir. These attacks are different. Coordinated strikes by the VYR. They're targeting stations and outposts simultaneously with the colony assaults." Hussman's shoulders squared as he studied the tactical display. Red markers multiplied across the map. "Send an alert to the nearest fleets. Reinforce the most vulnerable locations. Hold the line." The colonies and outposts burned, desperation clinging to the air. Humanity fought tooth and nail. Reinforcements had stabilized some positions, but the relief was temporary. Even as Tharn dreadnoughts and VYR strike cruisers dimmed on tactical maps, new threats emerged, larger, deadlier, and more numerous. Above Theta 7, the human fleet had formed a defensive perimeter. Hussman studied the holographic display, a chaotic tangle of red and blue markers. The enemy vastly outnumbered humanity's defenses, but his focus remained steady. "Admiral," Rivera called. "Enemy reinforcements detected. Tharn dreadnoughts and VYR cruisers converging on sectors Theta and Delta. Estimated arrival in 15 minutes. Hussman straightened, his voice calm. "Order all defensive positions to hold. Prioritize evacuation routes and civilian transports. Delay them at all costs." Across the colonies, human ships darted into position, their sleek forms dwarfed by enemy dreadnoughts. Groundside, Marines and civilian volunteers fortified makeshift defenses. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but their resolve was unshakable. Every second they bought was another step closer to survival. Far from the chaos, the infiltrator-class vessel Pandora's Box glided silently through the void, its matte-black hull absorbing light. Inside, Captain Darius Vil studied the mission briefing under the dim red glow of the war room. "This is a one-shot operation," Vil said firmly. His team, a blend of Marines and technical specialists, listened intently. Among them, Sergeant Kara Rowe, the lead cyber warfare officer, stood with sharp eyes locked on the holographic display of their target. Pandora's Box had one objective: to strike at the heart of the enemy's command network, crippling their ability to coordinate future assaults. If they succeeded, it could turn the tide of the war. Vil exhaled, steeling himself. "We move in 10 minutes. Let's get to work." Across the battlefront, humanity fought with everything it had. The colonies burned, but their people endured. In the face of overwhelming odds, the fleets, the soldiers, and the civilians stood together, refusing to break. And as long as they fought, humanity still had a chance to win. Vil nodded once, silently acknowledging the plan. Their target, a Thorn communication hub, a massive orbital station coordinating enemy fleets in the sector. The mission was simple in theory but dangerous in execution. Infiltrate, deploy a virus, and escape before detection. "Once we're in," Vil said, "Rowe will deploy the package. We'll have 10 minutes before they catch on, so we move fast." A murmur of agreement passed through the team. Vil's gaze swept over them, his tone firm but reassuring. "You're here because you're the best. Let's get it done." Minutes later, the Pandora's Box emerged from hyperspace at the system's edge, its cloaking systems humming to life as it approached the station. Docking silently, its grappling arms latched onto a maintenance airlock. The team disembarked swiftly, slipping through dimly lit corridors adorned with pulsating Thorn glyphs. They reached the control room without incident. Rowe approached the main console, inserting a sleek black module. "Package deploying," she announced. 3 minutes to completion. Footsteps echoed outside. "Thorn patrols." Vil signaled for silence as the guttural voices faded past the doorway. Rowe exhaled, her focus unwavering. "Done," she said, disconnecting the module. The team retraced their steps with calculated precision. Upon reaching the airlock, the Pandora's Box was waiting. The moment they were aboard, the ship disengaged, its cloaking system activating as it pulled away. Vil activated his comms. "This is Vil. The box is open." On the command deck of the human fleet, Admiral Hossman received the message. A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Understood, Captain. Good job." Turning to Lieutenant Rivera, he issued the next order. "Begin Phase 2. Across the sector, the virus unleashed chaos. Thorn dreadnoughts drifted off course, their navigation crippled. Vi strike cruisers faltered, their formations shattered by conflicting orders. Communication networks crackled with distorted transmissions. Despite the disarray, the enemy pressed their attack, their numerical advantage still overwhelming. Human forces fought valiantly, coordinated strikes and tactical ingenuity countering superior numbers. On the ground, makeshift barricades turned city streets into war zones. Marines and civilians stood side by side, repelling wave after wave of Thorn assaults. Hossman studied the battle reports. "They're fragmented," he said, his voice decisive. "This is our opening. Lieutenant Rivera, send orders to all battle groups. Reclaim lost positions. Evacuation zones take priority." Human forces seized the opportunity. Around Thetab 7, fighters targeted enemy engines with pinpoint accuracy. On Caliban's Reach, Lieutenant Commander Coolidge directed desperate evacuation efforts. "Keep the lanes clear. We don't leave anyone behind." The enemy struck back with a vengeance. Dozens of ships emerged from hyperspace, led by a command vessel bristling with weaponry. A Thorn warlord, his golden scales gleaming, snarled orders. "Regroup the fleet. Smash their defenses. Take this sector." But humanity was ready. Hidden within the Delta System's asteroid belt, a human fleet lay in silent ambush. Captain Serbala watched as the Thorn fleet advanced. "Hold positions," he ordered. "Wait for them to enter the kill zone." The enemy moved into the system, unaware of the trap. The moment they crossed the threshold, Serbala gave the command. "Engage." Railguns and missile batteries roared to life. Explosions ripped through Thorn formations as human forces struck with precision. The Thorn flagship struggled under relentless fire. "They're trying to escape," an officer reported. "Not today," Serbala replied. "All units, target their engines." A final barrage tore through the Thorn command ship, detonating it in a fiery explosion. The remaining enemy ships retreated into hyperspace. Reports flooded into Hossman's command center. The virus had done its job, and humanity had held the line. Now, it was time to counterattack. "Enemy reinforcements are on their way," Rivera warned. Hossman's gaze remained firm. "Let them come. It's time to end this." A secure channel opened. Tactical displays shifted. At the far edge of the battlefield, space itself rippled as a new formation materialized. The Medusa emerged. A Leviathan of human engineering, the first of the Leviathan-class battleships, its immense hull gleamed under the pale starlight, bristling with weaponry and state-of-the-art defenses. It was a fortress, built for domination. Dozens of warships followed in its wake, a vanguard of cutting-edge vessels moving with disciplined precision. Their arrival was a stark contrast to the battered human ships already locked in battle. On the Medusa's command deck, Admiral Ezra Zephaniah surveyed the tactical map. Status report. "Enemy forces remain concentrated around the colonies," his XO reported. "Heavily fortified, but their formations are fractured. They haven't detected us yet." Zephaniah's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. Let's make an impression." The Medusa surged forward, its main cannon roaring to life. A searing beam of energy sliced through the void, obliterating a Thorn dreadnought in an explosion of fire and debris. Smaller human ships followed, exploiting the chaos with precision strikes. The Thorn fleet, already weakened, faltered. Their formations broke further as panic spread. On the ground, Marines and civilians paused their desperate fight to watch the sky. The sight of the Medusa tearing through enemy ranks ignited hope. Cheers erupted across the colonies as human forces rallied, pushing back against the fractured Thorn attackers. Zephaniah issued orders with calm precision. Focus fire on their command ships. Break their chain of command. Keep the Medusa moving. Don't give them a stationary target. Aboard the Thorn command vessel, chaos reigned. The warlord roared, his golden scales shimmering under emergency lights. Regroup. Counterattack. We will not. A shockwave ripped through the ship. Systems failed. Explosions tore through the hull. The warlord bared his teeth in rage, but it was futile. His command vessel disintegrated in a blinding burst of fire. On the Medusa, the crew erupted in cheers. Zephaniah allowed a brief moment of satisfaction before addressing the fleet. This is Admiral Zephaniah. The enemy's command structure is in shambles. Press the advantage. No mercy. The Leviathan fleet surged forward, relentless. One by one, the remaining Thorn and Vi ships were obliterated or forced into retreat. The tide had turned. The once overwhelming enemy presence was reduced to scattered remnants fleeing into the void. Admiral Hassman watched from the command station. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. "Prepare for the next phase," he said. "We're taking the fight to them." The tactical display flickered as enemy markers vanished one by one. The battle was over. The crew exchanged nods, but Admiral Hassman remained composed. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "Open a channel to Errol." The comm officer hesitated before complying. Moments later, the holographic image of Errol, the THN leader, appeared. His golden scales had lost their luster, his expression twisted with rage and desperation. Hassman's gaze was cold, his words deliberate. "You wanted war, Errol. You have it. Now we're coming for all Maris." The transmission ended abruptly. Errol stood frozen, claws gripping the command console. He turned sharply to his crew, his voice a sharp growl. "Order all forces to retreat to Almaris. They must not reach our system." Meanwhile, Hassman turned to his XO, Rivera. "Send the next Leviathan." At the edge of the Sigma system, space itself fractured as a hyperspace rupture tore open. Emerging from the chaos was the Dauntless, the second Leviathan-class battleship, a mobile fortress bristling with weaponry and scarred from countless battles. Behind it followed a formidable fleet, poised to retake lost stations and outposts. On the command deck, Admiral Vol Kalen stood at the center, his piercing gaze fixed on the tactical display. "Status?" he asked, his voice sharp. His XO, Commander Jansen, gestured at the map. "THN and VY forces remain entrenched, but they haven't detected us yet. We're reading multiple troop transports and supply ships." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Good. Hit them fast before they regroup. Begin the approach." The Dauntless fired its railgun without warning. The kinetic projectile shredded a VY command ship, splitting it in two. The supporting human fleet followed suit, unleashing a coordinated assault that overwhelmed the enemy's outer defenses. Inside one of the besieged stations, Lieutenant Isla Manuelos, a hardened Marine, watched the carnage unfold. The Dauntless loomed outside, its firepower pounding enemy vessels. A Marine snapped her out of her trance. "Orders are to secure the station's core and prepare for extraction." Manuelos nodded. "Move out." Her team swept through the station, eliminating resistance sector by sector. The tide had turned, and the enemy knew it. Meanwhile, aboard the VY flagship, its insectoid captain received a frantic distress call. "Priority alert from Kilua. Human fleets have entered the home system. Defensive positions are overwhelmed." Silence hung over the bridge. The captain clicked its mandibles anxiously. "Verify the source." A tactical officer hesitated. "It matches Kilua's communication protocols. It's from the planetary defense grid." The captain straightened. We cannot abandon the homeland. Signal the fleet. Return to Kilua immediately. Protect the planet at all costs. One by one, VY ships broke formation, their engines flaring as they jumped to hyperspace. THN forces hesitated, but orders were clear. Retreat to Almaris. Do not engage further. The THN ships turned tail, engines blazing as they followed the VY into the void. On the Dauntless, Kalen smirked as enemy ships fled. They took the bait. Signal all ships, pursue the stragglers, but don't overextend. Focus on reclaiming the stations. Yes, Admiral, Jansen replied, relaying the orders. The fleet shifted. Smaller vessels pursued the retreating enemy while the Dauntless held position. Cleanup was swift. Human forces swept through abandoned positions, eliminating the remnants of resistance. Kalen activated a secure channel. Admiral Hussman, the stations are secured. Enemy forces eliminated. Hussman's voice came through, steady. Great. Come join us at the party, Admiral. This is going to be fun. Meanwhile, the remnants of the THN fleet limped toward Almaris, once a symbol of dominance, now their last bastion. On his flagship, Errol prowled the command deck, his golden scales dulled with frustration. His claws clenched as he scanned the tactical displays. Cowards, he snarled, slamming his fist onto the console. Cracks spidered across the surface. Fleeing like prey before predators. Humans. Insignificant, primitive. How dare they humiliate us? His crew remained silent, tense, focused on coordinating the retreat. None dared to interrupt his tirade. The THN Empire, once the most feared force in the galaxy, was now scattered and broken, forced to regroup at their sacred homeworld. Errol's voice dropped to a growl, his anger sharpening into resolve. They will come. I can feel it. We will crush them here, on the doorstep of Almaris. Ready the planetary defenses. Alert every remaining fleet. This ends with humanity's annihilation. But beneath his bluster, doubt festered. The THN forces were fractured, their allies abandoning them, and the humans, relentless and unpredictable, had outmaneuvered them at every turn. Almaris, once a beacon of THN supremacy, now bore the weight of desperation. Beyond its system, the colossal human fleet moved with deliberate precision, closing in on its next target. The silence of space was heavy with anticipation as ships emerged from hyperspace, their massive forms assembling into a formidable armada. At the fleet's core stood the Leviathan-class battleships, their immense frames radiating power. The Medusa and Dauntless flanked the formation like sentinels, weapons aglow and ready for action. The last ships materialized, the void twisting as stars elongated into brilliant streams of light. Above Alaris, the darkness cracked open as the human fleet erupted into view, a calculated wave of overwhelming force. At its head loomed the Zeus, the largest and most formidable of the Leviathans. Its angular frame gleamed under the distant star, weapons primed. The Thorn forces, caught in disarray, scrambled as alarms shrieked across their fleet. By the time their sensors registered the threat, humanity's armada had already filled the heavens. On the Thorn flagship, Errol stood frozen, his golden scales dull under the harsh display light. His claws dug into the command console as his crew watched in horror. How did they? He growled, shaking off disbelief. With a furious slam of his fist, he barked, "Ready all ships! Fire everything we have! They die here on Alaris." But it was too late. On the bridge of the Zeus, Admiral Ian Hussman stood calm, hands clasped behind his back, observing the tactical display. The Thorn fleet was a disorganized mass, attempting to rally. He stepped forward, his voice resonating with authority. "All units, commence the attack. Obliterate them." The order sent a surge of energy through the human fleet. The Zeus surged ahead, its cannons glowing before unleashing a devastating volley. Plasma beams and kinetic rounds carved through the void, slamming into the Thorn fleet. The Medusa's railguns tore through destroyers, their hulls rupturing in fiery explosions. The Dauntless led a squadron of smaller ships, their coordinated strikes dismantling any Thorn vessels that attempted to regroup. Errol watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated under the relentless assault. "Regroup," he roared. "Focus fire on the Zeus. Show them Thorn's superiority." But his orders were futile. Human sabotage had crippled their communications. The Zeus, impervious to desperate attacks, pressed forward. Its main cannon fired again, slicing through a massive Thorn Dreadnought, reducing it to a fireball of wreckage. Below, Thorn troops and civilians gazed skyward, their faces reflecting the fiery carnage above as their empire crumbled in mere moments. Hussman's voice remained steady as he issued the final command. "Bring the formation tighter. Sweep the area. Leave nothing intact." The human fleet moved with flawless precision. Smaller ships swarmed like wasps, finishing off disabled Thorn vessels. The Medusa and Dauntless never relented. In minutes, the Thorn fleet was reduced to scattered wreckage. Errol's flagship, surrounded by flames and debris, stood alone. Inside, Errol stood amidst the ruin of his command. His sharp breaths filled the silence as he stared at the tactical display. The human fleet now surrounded Alaris. Their dominance was absolute. On the Zeus, Hussman turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the Thorn flagship." A moment later, Errol's charred visage appeared on the main display, his crest drooping with exhaustion, yet his eyes burned with hatred. Hussman's gaze was cold. "This ends now, Errol. You wanted war, and you lost." Errol snarled, claws digging into the console. "Human scum. You think this changes anything? You will burn. Enough." Hussman's tone was sharp, unyielding. "You manipulated the council, slaughtered civilians, and brought war to our doorstep. Humanity will never forget. But we are not here to conquer or kill your people. We are here to end you." The transmission cut, and Hussman turned to his officers. "Prepare a strike team. I want Errol alive." Within minutes, human Marines, clad in advanced exosuits, launched from a stealth dropship toward the crippled Thorn flagship. They breached the hull, their movements methodical. Plasma bolts ricocheted as the demoralized Thorn crew mounted a feeble defense. The Marines advanced relentlessly. Errol, claws raised, stood at the command deck center, defiant. His remaining officers formed a desperate last stand, but resistance was futile. "Stand down, Errol," the lead Marine barked. Errol sneered. "You think you can take me alive? You don't have a choice." The Marine signaled his team. Within seconds, Errol was restrained. His officers, kneeling under the Marines' rifles, were likewise secured. As they withdrew, charges detonated, consuming the Thorn flagship in fire. By the time the Zeus registered the explosion, the dropship had docked. Errol was confined in a reinforced cell. "Is he secure?" Hussman asked without turning. "Yes, Admiral." "Shackled?" Hussman nodded. "Prepare the fleet for departure." The human armada tightened formation, leaving the ruins of the Thorn forces behind. On the surface of Alaris, the defeated Thorn watched in silence, their empire shattered in mere hours. Before the Zeus entered hyperspace, Hussman gave one final order. "Open a transmission to the Council." His holographic image flickered across the galaxy. His voice was calm, firm. "Let this serve as a warning. Humanity will not tolerate lies, oppression, or manipulation. We will deliver Errol, the instigator of this war, to face justice under council law. Let this be the end of such deceit and violence, for all our sakes." His expression darkened. "But make no mistake. If you target us again, our response will not be just a transaction." The transmission ended. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving the galaxy to reckon with the unyielding force of humanity.